Today we're talking with the Budgetnista, an author of Get Good with Money, Tiffany Aliche. Her financial advice has been featured on Good Morning America, The Today Show, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal. She is everywhere.
Many of us work, you pay bills, maybe go on vacation a little bit, there's nothing left over, maybe you save a little bit, and then you go back to work and you pay bills, a little vacation, a little saving, go back to work. And he's like, no, you have to disrupt that cycle. The true purpose of you working is to set aside enough so you can start to own things, own a business, own real estate, own investments via the market, whatever that might look like. So that way, eventually the things that you own can put you out of work.
Welcome to the Inspired Money Podcast, where we explore positive money stories. I'm Andy, your host and financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management. Together, let's shift our perspectives on money. Thank you for watching the Inspired Money channel that features interviews and money tips. If you want to do better with your money, hit like right now. Let's get started. I love the idea of trying to make more and give more to make a bigger impact in the world. But how can you do that? How can you possibly make more if you're having trouble paying essential bills? What if you've got student loan debt that feels overwhelming? Today's guest can help. Tiffany Aliche is founder of the Budgetnista.
I bought my home in cash. I bought my home in cash.
A financial movement that has helped over 1 million women to transform the way that they think about their finances. She's an award-winning personal financial educator and author of the best-selling book, Get Good with Money. A quick tidbit about her book, her pitch received offers from 9 publishers. That is impressive. If you want a chance to win a hardcover copy of Get Good with Money, make sure that you watch the entire episode. Then go to inspiredmoney.fm/getgood. Register with your email. You can get extra entries by subscribing to the Inspired Money YouTube channel, following me on Twitter and Instagram. 2 winners will be drawn and announced on June 15th, 2021. Good luck. In this episode, you'll learn what's wrong with having a strict saving mindset, how to come back from a dark financial place. For Tiffany, that was being over $300,000 in debt, and the difference between financial freedom and what Tiffany calls financial wholeness. Stay tuned for lots of money lessons. Now let's get inspired with Tiffany Aliche. Tiffany, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Andy. I'm excited to be here.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
My earliest childhood memory of money, I had to have been, I think, about 6 years old, and I was obsessed with running water. And so I used to turn on the water in the kitchen, in the bathroom, because I liked the sound. And my parents were trying to figure out a way to break me out of that bad habit. So during that same time, we didn't have much money. And I have 4 sisters now, but at the time I had 3. And we didn't have much money. So we used to do something called the ice cream day. When the ice cream truck came around, if it was your day, you got $1 from my father. If it wasn't, you could go inside and just get ice cream from the freezer. So we all got ice cream, but he didn't want to pay for ice cream for everyone, because it just got to be too expensive. So it was my day to go get my $1. So I ran inside to get my $1, and my father told me, "You just missed the waterman." And I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" And he said, "Well, every time you run the water, I have to pay the waterman. And I didn't have any money on me, so I had to use your ice cream day $1." I, of course, just, threw a temper tantrum and thought my life was over. And, once I calmed down, he explained to me that, water costs money and that he had to make a decision, and he put it toward the water. And so it was his way of getting me to see that there were financial consequences to what I was doing, but in a way that a 6-year-old could understand. So of course I never kept the water running indefinitely, ever, ever, ever again.
You were just trying to run like your 6-year-old spa, like trying to relax, right?
I want some feng shui. I didn't even know what that was, but I said, I just like the soothing sounds of water. Yes. But my father was a CFO and an accountant. He's got a degree in finance, and he's got his MBA and I think economics. And so money was something that he felt very comfortable talking to my sisters and I about. But he was also really good at making it age appropriate, because telling a 6-year-old, "Hey, the water bill is going to be high," I don't care. But telling a 6-year-old that $1 that I give you for ice cream, It could go towards your ice cream or it can go toward the water. And I was like, I choose ice cream.
It's a great lesson. And at the
Mhm.
time, as a 6-year-old, what you needed was a fountain that recirculated the water, and you would have been
Yes.
good.
Yes, you're right. Thinking about it, that actually would have probably helped out.
So, Tiffany, you wrote a great book, Get Good with Money. It's it's really a 10-step how-to guide. And I read it. I'm going to be sharing it because it's so full of practical advice.
Thank you.
Why did you initially not want to be on the cover?
Well, I was nervous because I mean, you and I can both admit that this is not an industry that's filled with people who look like you and I. And so I was nervous that if I was on the cover, it wasn't going to appeal to, people outside of Black women. And so, and I really wanted the message. I have this message of what I call financial wholeness. I really wanted this message that I felt did really appeal to a wide variety of people. I wanted to make sure that it reached them. And I was nervous that if I was on the cover, people would pigeonhole the book and say, oh, this is a money book for Black women. When really, in truth, it's really a money book for anyone. I mean, I do lean into women, in the book, but really the financial advice there, it really it can really navigate to who no matter where you are, help you navigate no matter where you are in life. So that's why. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm really surprised at how many different types of people that have leaned in to purchase the book who don't look like me. And who've reached out to me to say there was one of my favorite reviews was on what is it? Audible. It was a guy. His name was like Brad or something like that. And he said, "Hey Tiffany, like, oh, he wrote, I love this book so much because in the book, I'm speaking like to women because that's mostly my audience. So I'll say sis. He was like, I love this book so much. I don't even mind that she calls me sis or tells me to go ahead and get that dress from Target." I thought that was so awesome because I just assumed guys are not going to read this book. There's a woman on the cover, but he was like, no, it was so helpful that I could overlook the cis part. And so I just thought that that was just really powerful and just a lesson for me even to learn that when something is good that it will reach whom it's supposed to reach. And so yeah, it was just my nervousness that I would be pigeonholed and people wouldn't get it because of what I look like.
You mentioned in the book that your sister does some PR for you. From
Mhm.
a PR and marketing standpoint, have they had to do things to position the book so that it's not for a specific audience, or was that more in your mind?
They didn't really position. I mean, I say this that for I my audience is largely women. So that part I knew, you know. But what she has done is I've gotten on podcasts that where I know my audience is going to live, where women listen to, but I've also asked her specifically to put me on podcasts that where like financial education is talked about regularly because I knew that my audience are going to be mostly women or people who are wanting to learn financial education in a step-by-step easy comprehensible way, and so she made sure to do a great mix of that. So that was like kind of like her PR strategy, but everyone, I'm just really happy because my book agent as well as my publisher, they were like, no, we need to see you on the cover. It's important that the financial world gets to see that there are a myriad of different voices out there. They're all valid, that don't hide behind like, a cover with like, a graph or a chart or whatever. That's what we were thinking. She was like, no, I think people need to see that like, no, there are diverse voices out there who can teach you just as much as the voices that you're used to hearing from.
Yeah, it's funny that you have that reservation, but that's probably the strongest argument why you should be on the cover.
Mhm.
So you've helped so many people with their finances. People call you the budgetnista. Part of your story, I think, is that no one is perfect with money. You can be on track, you can go off track, you can come back and be on track again. In your book, you say getting good with money is about mastering fundamentals. It's not about magic. And what are some of the foundational lessons you got from your parents? Because you mentioned that your dad was a CFO and was able to communicate things in language that you understood even when you were very young.
Mhm. Some of the fundamental lessons that I learned is living below your means, um, is using money as a tool, not the goal itself. You know, that money's like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build your house or destroy your house. It really is you that gets to decide. And so I had to learn that the goal was not money, that money instead was the tool that can you can use to help reach some of your goals. You know, because so many of us are like money obsessed, and my parents especially were like, no, this is a tool to help build that house. This is a tool to, go to school. This is a tool to go on vacation. That it's not about the money itself, it's what the money can help you accomplish and achieve. Other things like basic things like how to budget, how to save, how to maintain debt and not make debt such a huge component of your life, how to maintain a strong credit score, how to start investing early. Um, just even something as basic as how to talk about money in a way. Like I didn't grow up with money shame. Honestly, all of my money hangups that I have now were due to the 2008, 9, 10 recession. That's like when I really like learned financial fear because I didn't grow up with that kind of language. If we talked about money, like even if I remember my mom lost her job, but I didn't feel fearful when we were kids because they didn't talk about it as if it was a fearful thing. It was like, mommy lost her job. So here's some of the adjustments we're gonna make. What do you guys think we can do? It felt very empowering. We took our cue from our parents, like, well, they might have been afraid, but they didn't put that fear on us. Um, I don't speak about money with shame or judgment because that's not the way money was spoken to me about. Because that was another lesson. So there were a lot of tangible things, but to me, the most valuable things I learned about money from my parents, especially my father, is the mindset component when it comes to money because that's what you fall back on when everything else fades away. You fall back on the mindset, and where your mind goes, so there's your money.
That's great. And it is valuable to know that money is complex. There are things that there are things that are within your control, but then 2008, there are external forces too that you have to be able to navigate the things that you cannot control. I heard you say that you like Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week. And I feel like this idea of sort of body hacking and trying to test nutrition and supplements and physical training to transform oneself into the closest thing to a superhuman as possible. In reading your book, I kind of felt like Tiffany is like the body hacking version of somebody with money and credit, just because you've seen very different money situations. When you were a teacher, there was a point when your parents said, "We think you look terrible. You need to go buy some new clothes."
Yes, yes.
Tell us about that
That
time.
that was such a valuable lesson because up until then, Andy, I thought that money was to be hoarded. That you hoard it, save it, save it, don't spend. That's the lesson that I thought I was supposed to learn because my parents were pretty frugal, but they were like, no, that's when I really learned that money was a tool, not the goal. Because I was a preschool teacher. I had just started teaching, and I'd been teaching maybe I want to say for maybe like two years and some change. And I'd saved up a good amount of money, over $20,000. I was making about $40,000 to $45,000 a year as a teacher, but I also tutored and babysat on the side. But I was saving every penny, but for no other reason than to save it. Like I wasn't saving for a home or saving for a car. I just was saving for savings because I didn't know what the other side of the equation was. Like I wasn't even saving to invest. I was just like, well, what am I supposed to do with this money? And so my parents didn't live far. My sister and I had an apartment together, and my parents lived maybe like 15 minutes away. So we would visit all the time. And then literally they called me in to sit down with them, and they said, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, "Yeah." They just assumed because I was a teacher, I didn't have any money.
You're like, "I'm doing great."
Yes, and they were just like, they literally said, "You look terrible, Tiffany. Like your clothes are ill fitting. You're not taking care of yourself." And I remember being so embarrassed. And they were like, "We're gonna get my this has never happened ever before." And I had to say, I want to say maybe I was 22 or 23. And my dad said, "I'm gonna give you my credit card. Your mother and I agreed. We're gonna allow you to spend," it was either $400 or $500 to buy new clothes. And I just remember being like, what? I was mad, but then I was like, you know what? I'm going to use their money. Meanwhile, I had like $30,000 saved. They didn't know. I didn't even tell them. But then it was kind of like a light bulb moment. Like I thought this is what they wanted for me to hoard my money, right? That's what was I'm supposed that's the responsible thing. And what they were teaching me in that lesson, even though they didn't know I had this pile, was that no, that money is meant to be put to work, whether it's to be invested if you have too much, whether it's to be put toward the thing you want to purchase or to grow in some way. Money is not meant to just lay dormant. And so it was such a valuable lesson that they didn't even realize that they were teaching me. It was an embarrassing lesson, but one that I really took with me, that money, like dormant money, is actually money that's being wasted. Put it to work in some way, shape, or form.
So on paper, I mean, as a teacher, oftentimes the assumption is, oh, you're not able to save because you're not making enough. You were saving. Did you start
Mhm.
loosening the savings reins a little bit after that?
Um, a little, but I also started to just decide what else did I want to do because I had not been on vacation. So I started to say, okay, one, I'm going to start putting more money toward my retirement account so I don't have quite so much. I'm going to start to create goals for the saving versus saving for saving's sake. And that's when one of my goals was I already had a car that I paid off. One of my goals was okay, I'm going to go back to school for my master's. Two, I am going to purchase my first home, which was a condo. So I decided to put my money to work. So it was investing, purchasing a home, going back to school versus so I don't know that I was still pretty frugal because there wasn't that much to spend on. I was single, I mean I had a boyfriend, but meaning like I didn't have to take care of kids. My rent was pretty low because I had my roommate, my sister. My father, one of the things that he helped me do right when I graduated college was I saved up money and he took me to his friend's used car lot and I got a 2-year-old car that I paid for with cash. So I didn't have a car note. My insurance is very, very low because I had my car, I owned it in full. So I didn't have I think I was just paying liability. It was like $62 a month. So my overhead just in general wasn't very high. And so as a result, I was like, all right, I will continue to spend at the level that I'm spending, but this money that I'm saving, I'm going to actually put it to work.
So all sounds like things are good. You did foreshadow a little bit saying 2008 because I know that you went to a dark financial place for a while. What happened?
No, absolutely. So I was about financially perfect, I would say, until about 25. And when I was 25, I bought the condo. I used the money that I'd saved in part for a down payment, which by itself was not a bad thing. My mortgage was like 1660. The condo was $220,000. Then I went back to school. And I think I want to say I graduated about 26, 27, but that left me with $52,000 worth of debt. I got my MBA. And because when I went to undergrad, I commuted. And so because I commuted and my parents also helped to pay what I did have to pay that was left over was like it wasn't much. So I had paid that off already. So I didn't have any undergrad student loans, but now I had this graduate school student loan of 52,000. And then around that time too, I decided, you know what, I want to learn how to invest. So I was like 26, 27, and I reached out to a friend who I thought was wealthy independently because he had a nice car, a nice watch, a fancy apartment. I was still young enough to think that if you had expensive things, it must mean you have money. And I call him Jake the Thief. His name is not Jake, but that's the nickname I gave him in the book. And I shared that Jake was like, "Yes, I will show you how to invest." And so instead, Jake got me mixed up in a credit card scam that left me $35,000 in credit card debt. And so it was really so all of a sudden I had student loans, 52,000, $35,000 of credit card debt, and a mortgage of $220,000. So just about $300,000 in debt where I was already overwhelmed, but then the recession hit in 2008 and I was kind of nervous but not really because I thought teachers don't lose their jobs. And in 2009, sure enough, I lost my job. So now I had all this debt and no income. I ended up moving back home with my parents. I was 29 going on 30 and not being able to pay anything. I eventually lost my home to foreclosure. It was just, I felt like I was drowning for a few years. It wasn't a few months. It was just, everything just compiled on, like getting phone calls from debt collectors, them telling we're going to take your house, foreclosure court. It was just such a pile on. And then, kind of losing my freedom and autonomy by staying with my parents because my parents are immigrant parents. And so we still had a curfew, even though I was 29 going on 30. That my dad was like, I don't care. As long as you live here, you still have to be home at midnight. So it was just a really hard time because usually when you're turning 30 is when you're feeling like your most adult self. Like, okay, I'm officially an adult. And I couldn't have felt even less like an adult, that I was dependent on so many people. And so it was just a really hard time. And thankfully, a friend of mine who had been trying to connect with me, her name was Linda, my best friend. She finally got me on the phone and I admitted everything that happened, like how I'd lost everything, how everyone knew me as like Tiffany, the go-to girl for managing her money, that I was no longer her. And I was moving back, I had moved back home and yeah, I owed so much money and I'd lost everything. And she was just like, is that it? That's why you've been hiding out? I'm at my mom's house too. The recession is here. So many of us are struggling, especially in this age range, And she shared like almost all of us have had credit card debt. You were the only friend that I had that didn't have credit card debt. Almost all of us had student loan debt. You were the only friend I knew that didn't have student loan debt. And she was like, this recession in particular, lots of people are losing their homes. It's not you, it's literally a housing bubble. So like what's happening? Yes, are there some choices that you could have made differently? But also there's some external things. And so, okay, and I remember it's what I needed to forgive myself because I didn't realize how angry I was at myself for making what I thought were like really dumb decisions. And so I've been beating myself up versus trying to rebuild myself so I can come out stronger. And so Linda's kind of pep talk gave me what I needed to shed some of that shame. Because Andy, shame is the worst. It's such a liar. Shame will tell you, Tiffany, you are a mistake, instead of Tiffany, you made a mistake. And so finally, I realized, okay, yes, I've made some mistakes. We're going to take responsibility, but I'm not carrying the burden of shame anymore.
Do you think it was especially hard because you were Tiffany, who was always good with credit? That's like the A student getting their
Yes,
first F. And it's
yes.
like a real punch to the gut. And you almost feel like I'm not a good person or there's something wrong with me now.
That's exactly how I felt because up until then, all my friends would come to me and ask me for help. Like, Tiffany, can you show me how to budget? Tiffany, can you show me how to save? Plus, two, the fact is, I could have just went to my father and asked him how to invest. Like I was like, why did you ask random Jake the thief? Who, you know what I mean? Like I had these resources right there and I chose otherwise. I just like it took me a long time to stop punishing myself for making those mistakes and not using it as like a condemnation of my character. It's like, Tiffany, you made a mistake. It happens. Okay. Like, so what are you going to do now? So I finally had to learn, like, this is what I wrote about in the book, to be what I call a paper towel person. And so, a paper towel person. So, as growing up as a kid, my father was more like fussy, which is like how I am. I make a mistake, like I spill juice all over the carpet. He's like, oh my goodness, like you have to be careful, Tiffany. You're always running back and forth. And so that's my dad. And then my mom, if I spilled that juice, she would just get up and get me a paper towel. And as a kid, I just always wondered, like, how come mommy never like makes a fuss? She just gets to the solution basically. And I thought, you know what? I want to be more like that. I don't want to fuss at myself. Like, because at the end of the day, when my dad finished going on and on about me being clumsy, he would go get me a paper towel. So it's like either way, you end at the solution. So why not just start there? So even now, because that's not my go-to, even now, I'm mindful that when I make a mistake, financial or otherwise, to remind myself, just go get the paper towel, Tiffany. Like, we're not here to make yourself feel bad. We get it. A mistake was made. Just get the paper towels, get straight to the solution.
$300,000 when you're out of a job, that's just a really deep hole.
hmm
How do you begin to shift your mindset and start finding solutions?
So, first, and this was a hard one because I was someone who had never, ever, ever, ever paid a bill late. And it took me a long time, too long. So I ended up spending more money than I ought to because I drained my savings account. I drained my retirement fund. I drained every bit of money I could find to try to keep my life afloat. And the lesson that I learned is that I should have put myself before my bills and focus what I call your health and safety budget. That when you don't have income coming in or enough income coming in, you are allowed to say, what expenses must I pay to maintain my health and safety? It doesn't mean that I'm never going to pay the other people that I owe, but if I'm not okay, nobody gets paid. And so I would have given myself permission to say, Tiffany, this can wait. Let them know, call them and let them know, hey, I don't have this at this moment in time. Is there a hardship program? If there is, great. If there's not, okay. If they harass you on the phone, I can send a cease and desist letter, which is what I ended up doing when I ran out of money anyway, and said, hey, no more calling me by law, but you can email me and send me letters. And just focus on those bills that maintained my health and safety. And those people who allowed me to sign up for a hardship program, sign up for those, and those who didn't, they just had to wait until I found additional sources of income. Then that's you. It's basically, Andy, you focus on what you can do, and I think that's what makes Get Good with Money, my book, so different. Because I don't know that I've read a financial book that says sometimes you're not going to be able to pay all your bills. There's a section where I say, like, what happens if you're broke? Because most books assume that you have something or that you're at least at zero. I'm like, no. What if you're negative 10? What if you're negative 300,000? And so I wanted to address that it is okay to prioritize yourself, to let others around you know everyone's not going to get paid right now, but eventually I will get to everyone. And that's what happened. When I finally ran out of money, I wish I didn't have to take me running out of money, but I finally ran out of money and I had to prioritize my health and safety budget bills anyway.
It's
And
interesting
so,
because
yeah.
it's almost like pride is getting in the way for what it's delaying actually solving the problem.
Yes, it did because I was like, there's no way I'm not going to be late. No, I'll just take the money out of my retirement account. And now I'm like cringing. I'm like, Tiffany, no, because you can never get back what you've lost in compounding interest. Your money earning money on the money. And so I just, now, I mean, there's no real getting back that money. Certainly, I have, I had to basically overcompensate now for what I've lost. And I'm okay now, but I wish I would not have sacrificed my full self, in an effort to, because of pride, to keep up with what I ended up losing anyway. So I poured at least an additional $40,000 into the house only to lose it.
Wow.
So that could have been that. If I was going to lose the house anyway, I'd rather lose the house and have my $40,000 intact.
But previously, you were always like in really good financial standing.
Hmm.
What resources did you turn to learn about how to manage that debt and start fixing it?
It was things like there were some lessons that I'd learned at home, and then also too, local banks would often have and it's funny because I started teaching them after a while, but they would have like free workshops and classes. So one, the money that I had coming in was largely unemployment, and they had an unemployment extension then, because just like they've done so now, except for now you're actually getting more. They allowed you to collect longer back then. I think normally unemployment's like a year or so, but I could collect for 2 years, which I did, the full 2.5 years. So that was that. And I used to really lean into, like, I never really read any Dave Ramsey books. I'm trying to think, did I ever read any Susie? No, I really liked David Bach. That was a book like I really loved, like, his Finish Rich series, Smart Women Finish Rich. And so I leaned into information there. Like I said, I took a lot of classes in the community to really learn, like, okay, so what happens with your debt? And that's when I learned about the snowball method and the avalanche method. Like, okay, so I can order my debt in this way. And so that's how I was able to get rid of the credit card debt. And I honestly, Andy, the biggest takeaway was I asked for help. So I remember distinctly being like, what do I do about this house? So I asked a friend, what do I do about my house? She's like, oh, I don't know. But a friend of mine worked for HUD. So I remember I'm like, well, can I have her number? And so I spoke to her. I said, what can I do about this house? And then she was like, you can apply for modification of your loan. And I was like, okay. So I applied for this modification, but I was denied, which was frustrating. And then they were like, well, you can try to do a short sale. So I tried and they wouldn't let, the bank would not let me, which was also frustrating. But these are questions that I asked and solutions that I tried. And then I tried to learn, well, what happens when they take the loan? Now, thankfully, during that time, when you foreclosed, because of all that was happening, there was a law in place that after they took your property, you didn't actually have to pay taxes on the money that you no longer had to pay on the home. So everybody doesn't understand that when you get debt basically forgiven, anything over $600, you leave yourself open to a tax liability. So let's just say you owe $1,000, bill on your credit card, and you negotiate it down to $100. So that $900, the government can look at that as money earned because it's money you did not have to pay, and you would have to pay taxes on that. Now, a friend of mine, I felt so bad for her because she lost her house later when that temporary law was no longer in place. So she ended up owing $30,000 because her home was foreclosed upon. She no longer had to pay that mortgage, but they were like, you have to pay taxes
Because
on the
they treat it
mortgage.
like income. That's crazy.
Yes, which is like, what? So thankfully during that time, because I asked a lot of questions, I found out like, okay, it was one of the things that allowed me to let go of the home. I'm like, I know, Tiffany, you put tens of thousands of dollars into this home, but let it go because there's a law in place where you're not going to have to pay, like what the house is basically your debt that's quote unquote being forgiven. And so it allowed me to let go of that home because the house was also underwater. Meaning I paid 220 for the house, and at the time, it was purported to be worth about 150, 160. So it's like, what, even if I had the money to pay for, what am I paying for a house that's not worth what I owe? And so it was a lot of questions asked. And one person sometimes would lead me to the next person, would lead me to the next person. I kept a notebook of like what I learned and who I spoke to and what those resources were. And it's one of the things like why when I was writing Get Good with Money, I was really able to write from a place of I've been here. And I know where you're like, well, how about this? And what about this? The number one piece of feedback I get about my book is that, like, one, it feels like a friend is like speaking to me. And two, it's so full of information because I'm trying to give you the resources so you don't have to go to 20 different places like I did in order to figure out what should I do next.
Tiffany, it sounds like you went through financial hell, really.
Yes, I did. I mean, I can smile now because I'm on the other side and I feel great, and it wasn't quick. I lost my job at 29, moved in with my parents at 30, moved in with my sister at 31, moved into a room. A friend of mine, she had found this house where a woman was renting out by the room for $500 a month. And it was four of us, four friends. So we each rented a room because we all were, basically lost everything. Moved into a room at 32, 33, 34. So think about that. It was really 6 years. I had a hard time. And so I share that because I know people feel like maybe there should be some sort of quick turnaround. But in that time, although it looked like it was all hard, it wasn't. Because when I tell you some of my best times when living in a home with four other women who were also building businesses, it was like we lived in the incubator. So like, and we were all adults. So it wasn't like, a sorority house where everybody's like 19 and immature. So it's like these are all 30 something year old women. We were all so helpful to each other. Everyone cleaned up after themselves. But if I needed, one woman was a graphic designer. So if I needed something, I could go. I'm like, Nina, can you take a look at this? One woman was a writer. So if I needed something, Diasa, can you take a look at this? And so it was just honestly some of my brokest times were also some of my most joyful. So there was a lesson there too, Andy, that really it was not money that brought me joy. Certainly not knowing if you could, feed yourself. Obviously, is scary. But I was building the Budgetnista during that time. So even as I started to do better, so I would say that I started to maybe do a little bit better maybe 3 years in. But I was like, no, no, I'm not going to increase my lifestyle until I get to a very comfortable place. And then by 34, I was like, okay, I feel my business was making six figures. And I felt like strong enough to say I can move on from living the way I was living because my business was consistently making. Now, it was making six figures, but it wasn't giving me six figures. I was making about as much as I used to make as a preschool teacher, around 40 something $1,000 a year, but still enough for me to get a place. And then what happens, because lessons are cumulative in their results, is that like all these lessons started piling on. And by 35, my business jumped up tremendously with all that I'd learned. And by 36, it was a seven-figure business. And by 37, I was worth seven figures, like, and then by last year, I'm 41 now. Last year we made our first eight figures, $10 million last year. But like it seems so quick, like, but what happens, it's like a plant. The seed, the seed bursting through the dirt takes the longest amount of time. But once it does, the growth seems rapid. But no, that you have to give your seed a chance to do what it does. And sometimes that's the most frustrating part. And that's what I teach. Like, I feel like I used to be a preschool teacher, and I feel like I am the fundamentals teacher when it comes to finance. That if I can get you to do the fundamentals, the seed work, then once you break through the dirt, it's like sky's the limit for you. Like, I can pass you off to someone else, but I'm here to hold you down and say, no, we have to get to the seed work.
I love the idea of the cumulative effect. And you are thriving today. I don't need to remind you that you are now a New York Times bestselling author. In
I
addition to
know.
being a successful entrepreneur who is thriving, during that time, did it feel just like a slow climb out from like the dark times?
It did and didn't, because in I would say the first 2 or 3 years, it seemed like dreary. But then, I learned perspective is everything. Once I moved into the house with my friends, I mean, I remember distinctly thinking, like, like, I'm living in this room, but like, you could go to the living room and just be like having like this amazing conversation, would be hysterically laughing with like my three other girlfriends, and deciding what we're going to cook for dinner tonight. Our house became a hub for other entrepreneurs. Like, people started to just come over. We always had a house full of amazing, smart, ambitious people. And so I would just say the first couple of years were really the hardest. But even though I wasn't, I didn't have any level of success a few years after that, it didn't feel dreary. It felt like I was growing, and I learned to change my perspective of what really mattered. And I felt like, that something was going to come of the work that I was putting in. Consistency and action, make all the difference. Like, if you just keep going, and keep going on a consistent basis, I knew that something was going to come of the work that I was putting in.
I'm dying to ask you this because in the book you wrote, wealth is more than money in the bank. You felt more financially secure making $39,000 as a teacher per year than as an entrepreneur making $39,000 per month.
Yes. So remember I told you, Andy, earlier that I didn't learn financial fear at home, that the recession taught me that. It was one of the worst lessons that I learned, because it took me a long time. I would say it's maybe it's only been the last couple of years that I have let go of most of what I learned during most of the terrible lessons I learned during the recession, which is to be afraid. Like, I was making a ton of money, but I was scared to death. And one of the reasons why I wrote Get Good with Money is because I said, Tiffany, you are on paper financially free. Why are you still so scared? And I was like, because I knew that I was still a whole mess, still a whole financial mess. So I started to write down, well, what would make you feel secure? And that's when I realized it was these 10 fundamental things. And the subtitle of the book is 10 Simple Steps to Becoming Financially Whole. And that's what I was looking for. So had I reached financial freedom? Yes. Was I financially whole? No. Those 10 steps are budgeting, saving, credit, debt, learning to earn, investing for both retirement and wealth, insurance, net worth, your financial team, and estate planning. And I can look back to 22-year-old Tiffany, who was doing what her father told her to do with her money. I was financially whole then, Andy. Like, I had those things. I had an estate plan that was age appropriate for a 22-year-old. I didn't have any children. I didn't have any property, but my estate plan was my mom and my dad, they were beneficiaries on my life insurance policy, that I got when I was like 26 after I bought the condo. They were my beneficiaries on my bank account. That's estate planning for a 22-year-old, you know? But as a 30 something year old, I didn't have an estate plan that was age appropriate. I was not insured in a way that was age appropriate. I didn't have the financial team. Back then my financial team were my parents, but I didn't have a financial team that was age appropriate for a 34-year-old, 35-year-old. And so that's really why I wrote Get Good with Money, because I said I'm not the only one who might not realize that having a pile of money is not the answer. It is a holistic approach to money that you're really seeking. I want you to have a strong financial foundation. That is what financial wholeness is about. It's the strong financial foundation that the rest of your life is built upon.
Yeah, how do you define it? How do you define financial freedom differently from financial wholeness?
So I define financial freedom because this is typically when people say, "What does financial freedom look like for you?" It's having enough money not to have to work anymore. I'm free from having to depend on income coming in from my work, you know? And so I'm there now. If I did not want to do Budgetnista anymore, if I did not want to work anymore, I could stop working and still maintain my current lifestyle. You would not know the difference. And so to me, financial freedom is that you don't have to work if you don't want to because your money makes enough money for you. Financial wholeness are the financial fundamentals that support your lifestyle. So it's not just having a pile of money, it are your assets protected? Do you have a team around you that will help you with your finances? Do you have an estate plan that's age appropriate? Are you investing in a way that makes sense for you to continue to grow wealth? Yes, there's the basic stuff too, like budgeting and saving and debt and learning to earn. So that's how I describe the difference. It's the difference between having your pile of money and not having to work, or having a foundation that no matter what happens, you will be able to maintain your current financial lifestyle.
So financial wholeness is for everyone.
Yes, financial freedom for some of us, because let's be real, if we're being honest, Andy, everyone's not going to be able to one day have a pile of money where they don't have to work anymore.
Yeah, it also depends on what your expenses are too. Like that's
Mhm.
going to be a different gauge also.
Exactly. So I would say financial freedom, some people will achieve that. Financial wholeness, everyone can achieve that.
I'm financially free if I was willing to eat ramen every day, like
Is-
with no variety, you know?
yes.
So these are the reasons why I want to share your book, because it has those 10 areas and it is really comprehensive. One area that I noticed that was not included is giving, like the
Mm,
charity.
yes. So I included that at the end somewhat. I struggle between like how, because I believe in giving, and I struggle with how much of that was my values versus someone else's values. And I really wanted not to for people to feel judged about what they're going to do. And so I did struggle with that. So at the very end, in the kind of like the conclusion, something that I say is that that like now that you've gotten this information to share it with others, but give of yourself, your time, your money, your energy. So I share that in the very last page, but that is something that I struggle with because it's part of my value system, but I didn't want to impose that on other people in case it wasn't part of their value system, although I think it's an important component, at least for me.
I think maybe you're holding something back for the follow-up book.
Maybe so. No, maybe so.
You've helped so many women and men. Uh, have you found like common patterns among those who are struggling with their money?
Yes. Some of the common patterns that I found is that people are typically self-diagnosing incorrectly. Somebody will say, "Oh, my credit, that's my issue." And when we really look, it's like, it's not really a credit issue. Your credit's this way because you don't have a really great budget. And because you're paying bills late because your budget is not, it's not systemized or automated or setting you up for success. Or somebody might say, like they're wanting to invest in stocks, right? And I'm like, oh, you know what, but you actually don't set aside anything for retirement. Like, so you're wanting, you're like, oh, I wish I could jump into like GameStop or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, but you don't even have like, like what is your older self going to eat? Where are they going to sleep? And so that's what I find that across the board, that when someone realizes they're having a financial issue, they usually self-diagnose incorrectly because they don't realize that like the thing that they're seeing is typically is of a result of a financial wholeness step that they're not hitting.
That's like being sick and you only see the symptom, and not
Hmm.
until the doctor takes a look at you and says, all right, this is the problem.
Yes. I remember one time I went to the doctor and I was getting uh, a headache, and he sent me to the dentist. And I'm like, why? He said, you likely have nerve pain in your tooth. I'm like, yeah, but why is it giving me a headache? And he said, pain, it's called radiant pain. That something that's here hurting me in my jaw, that nerve is actually radiating beyond my jaw and actually giving me a headache. And I thought, wow. So sometimes what you are feeling the headache, which is your credit or you don't have stocks, but really the real issue is someplace else in your financial life. And if you were to take care of that, then the other issues would also go away. So that's what I help. Like one of the things, like if you go to getgoodwithmoney.com, we've got this quiz that people can take to see, I call it the financial wholeness quiz, that you can take to kind of see like, oh, this is where I'm really having issue. It gives you like you're 20% whole or 30% whole, but you really get to see like, okay, where am I saying yes to? Where am I saying no to really get to see like, okay, this is really my issue, not what I thought it was.
I'll put that link in the show notes. I wanted to highlight one thing that you included, and I think it was kind of an advanced tip, and it's in the Building Your Net Worth chapter. You included something that you heard from Jay-Z's former business partner.
Yes. I love this guy. I just happen to be like on Instagram scrolling just like everybody else. And so his name is Dame Dash, and he's a little bit like he's the type of guy, think of Kanye, like like big personality. A lot of people dislike him, but they miss the message because of his personality. But he said something that I was like, he's right. He said, I wish more people understood the purpose of work. That the purpose of working is to own. So literally think about it. Like preschool teacher Tiffany, she's working, she's working, she's working. So many of us work, you pay bills, maybe go on vacation a little bit, and there's nothing left over. Maybe you save a little bit, and then you go back to work and you pay bills, a little vacation, a little saving, go back to work. And he's like, no, you have to disrupt that cycle. The purpose, true purpose of you working is to set aside enough so you can start to own things, own a business, own real estate, own investments via the market, whatever that might look like. Because so that way, eventually, the things that you own can put you out of work. That's the mistake so many of us make, that we never set aside any money for ownership. So we stay in the hamster wheel forever. So imagine you just put a little bit to the side. Eventually, you have enough to buy something that you can own and buy a little bit more and buy a little bit more. And before you know it, the things that you own make more than what you're making at work, and you can stop that work.
It's a powerful message and really mindset shift. I can't believe that you learned something from Instagram.
I know. You have to be mindful of Instagram. There's a lot of foolishness, but yes, it was just so, because you kind of when I say it out loud, you're like, that makes sense. But so many of us forget that. We're just working to continue the life. It's just the cycle, and it's like, no, how do I break the cycle? By setting aside money for ownership.
That's a real gem. Tiffany, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
I define success by working and living with integrity, by honoring and understanding like what your true purpose is and living in that, in alignment with that. And I define success by your close proximity to joy, more and more, because I have seen everything, Andy, from like broke, negative $300,000 in debt, or like negative $300,000 net worth, to my multi 7-figure net worth now, and my companies that do really well. And so I've seen the gamut of having nothing, having a little, having a medium, having a lot. And I've seen that my happiest moments have been sprinkled throughout, that it was never tied to what I had actually. It was tied to who I was connected to and how I felt I was showing up in my life. And so I'm not going to pretend like, oh, if you have no money to feed yourself, that there's joy there. There wasn't. But once I got past that point, more money didn't actually make me happier. It didn't shift any of the joy. And so, yeah, for me, success is proximity to joy, living with integrity, living within alignment of why you were created, and figuring out what that is if you don't know what that is. So that's when I'm most successful.
So it sounds like purpose is an important piece of that.
Yes, absolutely. That purpose is success for me. And so whenever I feel misaligned, then that's when I'm like, okay, that's when I kind of what I call it the funk. When I'm like, I don't feel like I don't feel quite right, And no matter what's happening, I don't care. I could have just won a huge award, and I'm like, I don't care because I'm not aligned with what my purpose is. And once I am, nothing amazing could be happening, but I could feel like the most successful person because I am back in alignment with why I was created, which to me is to teach and to transform.
Huge. We love the work that you're doing, and thank you for sharing your personal story and some of the money lessons. We didn't dig deep into the 10 different steps to financial wholeness, but I think that that's why viewers and listeners should buy the book. Can you tell the
Mhm.
Inspired Money Maker where to follow you and find out more?
Sure. So I am the Budgetnista on all the social platforms. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the things. And you can find out more about me and get good with money 10 simple steps to becoming financially whole at getgoodwithmoney.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. Wish you continued success.
Thank you.
So what was your favorite inspired money moment? Tiffany shared a lot that I liked. Here are 3 things. Number 1, money's a tool, not the goal itself. Like a hammer, money can be used to build a house or destroy a house. 2, dormant money is like money being wasted. You've got to put your money to work. And 3, we now understand the real purpose for working. The purpose of work is to own. When done right, you can eventually live off the assets you've worked for. If you had a different favorite inspired money moment, let me know by posting a comment below. And don't forget to enter for a chance to win a hardcover copy of Get Good with Money. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/getgood. For listening to the end, I want to send you an Inspired Money sticker. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/Andy, send me your name and address, and I will put one of these in the mail for you. Thank you so much for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.